There's a great quote I want to start our conversation with. I found it in a favorite book of mine called The Return of Israel and the Hope of the World by Abraham Livni. He starts his book with the following quote from Rousseau, the French philosopher. The quote is as follows: "At the Sorbonne, it is clear as day that the messianic prophecies refer to Jesus Christ. Among the rabbis of Amsterdam, it is just as obvious that they have not the slightest connection. I will never believe that I have clearly heard the reasons of the Jews until they have an independent state, schools and universities where they can discuss and dispute freely without risk. Only then will we know what they have to say." If I could just add one word to his quote, only when the Jews have an independent state, schools, universities, and their own podcasts, then we will know what the Jews truly have to say. Now, our podcast, our conversation is really meant to, for the first time, that the Jewish people now have our own state. We have our own voice. What are all of those things that we're just discovering right now that we have never discovered before in our history? What are the ideas that are facing the Jewish people today that are new, that are old, of course, but they're also very new? Now, you wrote, Rabbi Elie Mischel, you wrote a brand new book called Countdown: American Jews and God's Plan for Redemption. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote that book now, and what are the big ideas that the Jewish people have, or we're only finding out today?
So really it comes down to the quote with which you started this podcast, which we can't really understand what the Jewish people have to say to the world, what our unique contribution is. And it is certainly meant to be unique. God set us aside for a purpose. We cannot understand that message. We can't articulate that message unless we are doing so from the land of Israel and as part of a sovereign state of Israel. Now, that's not all that obvious, right? You know, we have books, we have lots of ideas, we've had great teachers and scholars and thinkers for thousands of years, all throughout the diaspora, the exile, when Jews lived all over the world. Maimonides lived in Spain and in Egypt. We had so many unbelievable thinkers in Eastern Europe and in America today, so many great Jewish thinkers. So why is it that we can't truly speak to the world until we come back to the land of Israel? So that idea is at the heart of what Countdown, my new book, is all about. You see, I try to explain this through the lens of American Jewry. Why? Because American Jews are really the last great exile or diaspora Jewish community in the world. Yes, we do have some Jews left in Canada and South America and England and so on and so forth, but the numbers are very small and they're shrinking. And American Jews are really the last great diaspora community. And I wanted to explore this question of Jewish nationhood and why is that so central, specifically through the lens of American Jews, right? The ones who are not living Jewish nationhood, right? They are choosing to remain in America one way or another. They haven't moved to Israel. The doors are open. The gates are open to Israel. They have been for close to 80 years. And yet you have millions of Jews who are living in America, specifically choosing not to live in Israel. And so I thought that was a very powerful way to understand why Jewish nationhood is so essential and so unique, right? By exploring the key community that has not embraced Jewish nationhood. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if that sounds a little bit theoretical, just to step back for a moment and think about what we're living through today in America, what Jews are living through in America today. We all know anti-Semitism is not just up. It's up in a dramatic way that makes it feel like things are different now. This is not the America that you and I grew up in. Right. You grew up in Ohio. I grew up in New York, New Jersey, the East Coast. Ohio is probably friendlier, but either way, we both had really, I think, nice, pleasant childhoods.
I don't think I ever experienced anti-Semitism. ever.
Right. I think I maybe got a middle finger once when once or twice when people drove by us on the road, but there was not much more than that. Certainly nothing to scar me,
Right,
and
right. We actually once maybe had like pennies thrown at us at a basketball game. Actually, now that you mentioned the middle finger,
right.
But that didn't scar us.
Yeah, like
it was
small
kind
things.
of funny. It was like, oh wow, like anti-Semitism still exists. That's so cute.
Exactly. And today, what we're seeing is, coming from now all sides of the spectrum, left and right, not just anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism of a very unique type. An anti-Semitism that connects directly to this Jewish nationhood with which we started our conversation. Because they're not claiming now, the anti-Semites in America, people like Tucker Carlson on the right or Ilhan Omar on the left, they're not claiming, that Jews own all the banks, right? Like they used to do, or that we're using the blood of Christian children to bake matzah or something like that, right? That's not what they're claiming today. Right. They are focused on a very specific claim, which is the attack of dual loyalty. The Jews in America are not really loyal to America, but rather they are loyal to Israel. We see it all the time. Regular people being attacked, the whole community being smeared, or very individual people like Mark Levin, who's being attacked all the time as being a shill for Israel, or Ben Shapiro. If you're an American Jew, or even a Christian Zionist who cares about Israel, you're automatically no longer loyal to America. Of course, it's a standard that's not applied anywhere else, right? If you come from Italy, you're an Italian American, you still care about Italy. Nobody says that you have dual loyalty. That's not, but it's only the Jews. Right? So the question that I deal with in this book is, why is this the attack of the moment? Why is this happening? Nothing in this world happens by accident. We are all believers here at Israel 365. I think everybody watching is watching because they're Bible believers. We know that God runs the world. This can't be an accident that everyone is attacking us on precisely this point.
So I'm at the edge of my seat. It's a great question.
So why is this happening right now? This is the great question. And I think I'm going to say something which is a little bit crazy. It may sound crazy, but I believe it's the truth. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, all these people on the left, they are all God's messengers. Without realizing it, they are very much doing God's will because God has a specific plan for the Jews of America. God is trying to send a very clear message to American Jews, right, that they must rethink their identity. Right? For 100+ years, American Jews have been very hazy about who they are. Are we a religion? Are we a nation? Are we an ethnicity? It's all very unclear, and they've purposely kept it unclear.
The big question when I was young, when you were young, was, are we American Jews or Jewish Americans?
Exactly. So meaning, which one is the essential part of who we are, and which one is the secondary element of our identity? That's really the question. And the confusion has only gotten worse, right? There's so many Jews today in America who view being a Jewish American, let's say, in the same way as being a Baptist American, or a Muslim American, or a Pentecostal American, or a Catholic American, meaning as a faith or as a religion. But they're Americans. That's their national identity of the Jewish, faith persuasion, right? That's how they view it. Now, the problem is that is a direct violation of everything God says throughout the entire Bible. It is simply not true.
About the Jews.
About the Jews.
In other words, it is true, perhaps, about other religions.
And other faiths, exactly right. But to be a Jew, right, it has nothing, it's not about being a part of a religion. You are not a part of a faith or a religion if you are a Jew. It is very clear from the very, very beginning. Right? God tells Abraham to leave where he was in Genesis 12, the land of his forefathers, and to go to another land that he will show him. And it's interesting. It says there that, who came with him, right? Someone says that the souls that he made in Haran came with Abraham to the land of Israel. What does that mean? So the sages tell us, and I think this is the simple understanding, is that Abraham, even before God came and spoke to him, was the leader of a religion. He was a faith leader. God comes to Abraham and says, I don't want you to be this faith leader. I want you to leave this growing faith, this growing religion that you created, and I want you to go to a land that I will show you where you and your wife will have a baby, and you will make a nation.
Right. There you will become a great
nation. Exactly right. So God is telling Abraham, leave the religion that you started and go and start a new nation. And it's so clear all through the Bible. I mean, you have to really blind yourself to not see it. When God says to, through the angel to Rebekah, that there are two nations growing, in your womb, Jacob and Esau, right? When the people of Israel come to Sinai, we are told that you will be a nation of priests, a holy nation.
Right.
It doesn't say anywhere that we will be a religion. We are a nation.
Right.
And if you look at the Bible itself, it's a national constitution. That's what it is. It's not a personal religious guide.
It's interesting because the actual word, goy kadosh, or that where God says to Abraham that I will make you a goy, a nation, a goy, which is funny because that has become the word that the anti-Semites are latching on to.
As if when we say goy, it's some sort of evil description of Gentiles,
right?
Which is so clearly not. We actually have on the Israel Truth Network, if you check it out, there's a whole article all about what the real meaning of goy is. Right. That just means nation.
Right. Candace, learn some Hebrew.
Exactly. Exactly right. So it's extremely clear when you read the Bible, it does have some individual, guidance in the Bible a little bit, right? It talks about putting on phylacteries, the tefillin that Jews wear, or putting on a talit, right? It has a few verses here and there about those things, but the vast majority of the Bible, the vast majority of it is nationhood. It's a national constitution about how to have a holy army. The Bible goes on and on and on about how to have a holy army, about how to have a holy government, and how to have a holy economy. All of those things are dealt with at great length, in depth, because this is not a book geared towards the individual. Of course, it has what to say to the individual. Right. Individuals are the component parts of a nation, but ultimately it's really speaking to a nation. And that's what makes the Bible so unique. You don't necessarily need the Bible to be a holy individual. The great question that the Bible is dealing with is, how do you have a holy nation? How do you take all of what the seemingly secular elements of this world, right? The government, the army, the economy, and all of those things. And how do you make them holy as well? And how do you have all of the tribes of a nation live in holiness together in peace and unity? That is what the Bible is coming to teach the world. And that is why the Jews must be not a faith, but rather a nation. Because only a holy nation can teach other nations how to be holy.
Okay, beautiful idea, right? But what does that have to do with American Jews? Right? They're not living here in Israel, so they don't have the opportunity to create a holy economy or a biblical military, right?
And that's precisely the point, meaning many American Jews believe, perhaps the majority of them believe, that they are living full Jewish lives in America. But the reality is that when Jews are in exile, it is simply impossible to fulfill the mission for which we were placed on this earth. Right, which is to build this nation, right? We need them here in Israel. American Jews are still 40% of the Jews in the world, right? Without them, we have a massive hole here in Israel. We have huge open spaces in our tiny country that need to be filled, and we need their contributions. And American Jews living in exile simply are unable. They can go through the motions of keeping some of the commandments, but they can't play a role in Israel fulfilling its mission, right? And this is the Universal Zionism podcast, right? Universal Zionism requires Jews and Christians together, each of us, to fulfill our unique role in order to advance redemption. So this is not happening with the millions of Jews still living in America. And so God is coming through these anti-Semites at this late stage in history, right? And pressing the pain point of American Jews by honing in on dual loyalty. What is that message? And think about what they're saying, right? It's a message from God through these evil people to American Jews, pressing the pain point, saying, who are you? What is your identity? The Jews of America are being forced to think about this against their will because of this anti-Semitism. Who am I most loyal to? Right. Now, I should be clear that Jews in America are loyal. Right, the anti-Semites are only partially right. There's a problem here with American Jews, but it's not loyalty, right? We actually have a law in the sages say in the Talmud, right, that the law of the land is a law. You have to, if you're living in a country, you must be a good citizen, a loyal citizen. That's not the question.
Right. No, I mean, just to pause for a moment, absolutely. I think that American Jews are the most patriotic of any Jewish community around the world.
And think about America without the contributions of American Jews. I mean, America may not even exist today without all the incredible benefits and everything that American Jews have contributed in addition to their loyalty.
Right. And the whole kind of premise is also like, on the one hand, it's very superficial. It's like, who do you love more, your mother or your father? You have to choose one. Why do you have to choose one?
So this gets down to the question. I think you do have to choose. So I'll explain. So loyalty is not really the issue. This dual loyalty attack is therefore unfair and frankly straight up anti-Semitic. There is a problem, however, of dual identity. In the end of the day, right? If we're honest and read the Bible, right, and you read, what Jews have prayed for thousands of years. Right? In our prayers, 3 times a day, we pray to God and we say, please, blow the great shofar and bring all the people of Israel back to the land of Israel. We pray to go to Jerusalem, to return to Jerusalem. V'lirushalayim ircha b'rachamim tashuv. To Jerusalem, your city, in mercy, please bring us back. Right? What the rabbis are saying, what the Bible is telling us is that Jews, your identity is the land of Israel. This is the whole Bible. This is Ezra, Nehemiah, right? They were doing quite well in Persia, but they still came back to the land of Israel because that is where we as a nation can fulfill our mission, only as a nation in our land. So this question of dual identity is a very real one. And I think a great example of it that I cover in the book comes from President Trump himself. Now, if you remember, it wasn't that long ago that he came to the Knesset for a tremendous celebratory gathering.
When the hostages were released.
When the hostages were released finally and brought home from Gaza. And it was an awesome moment, right? President Trump in the Knesset, the celebration, the joy, and for good reason. I mean, what an incredible moment. I think we all hoped to see that day, but we didn't necessarily believe that it would happen. And it did. But in the middle of his speech, President Trump does something classic President Trump. He goes off script and it's incredibly revealing. He starts talking about Miriam Adelson, right, who's the widow of Sheldon Adelson, and they were
his number one donors.
Right. And Sheldon
$100 million
Adelson
to his campaign.
Huge Trump people. Yeah. Tremendous, patriots, and what they did for America, enormous. What the Adelsons gave over the years, millions and millions of dollars, cancer research, and all these things, in addition to being President Trump's number one donor. And so he passes away, and Miriam Adelson is there in the Knesset, and President Trump looks at her and says, "Miriam, what do you love more? What do you love more, America or Israel?"
Oui. Yeah, I
now,
remember that.
He does not say, are you loyal to America and Israel or Israel? He doesn't say that because President Trump is not an anti-Semite. He knows she's loyal. Right. He knows that she's a good citizen. There's no question anywhere in his mind that Miriam Adelson is an amazing patriotic person, right? Who's done tremendous good for America. But what he asked her was something much deeper. And the fact that he did this in front of the entire world was... maybe not the nicest thing, but he said, who do you love more? He didn't ask her about loyalty. He asked her about identity. Where is your heart? And to that, and of course she refused to answer because what could she say? Because as a good Jew, right? As a good Jew, and she is, her heart, of course, is in Jerusalem. It has to be. She's loyal to America, but her heart is in Jerusalem. And if she had said otherwise, if she said, I love America more, right, that would have been either a lie or a betrayal of the Jewish people, because that's what the Bible demands of us. She knows that her heart, she belongs in the land of Israel, even if she's living in America. And so that is really the question. That is the challenge. And I believe that's why God is sending all of these anti-Semites to make Jews very uncomfortable. Because in the end of the day, God is saying, guys, we've had the state of Israel for 78 years. The doors have been wide open for 78 years. My redemptive plan for the world is for Israel, the people of Israel, to come back to the land of Israel, to create, and it's not easy, but to create an awesome and holy nation that lives by the Bible, that can then be a light unto all the nations of the world. That is the plan. God spells it out multiple times in the Bible and through his prophets. Yeah. That's the plan. You, 40% of the Jews of the world, are choosing to hang out in America, and you're just saying, yeah, no, thank you. Not interested. We're happy over here. We like New Jersey. We like Florida, Texas. Right? It's awesome. And these are great places, and I get it. They're comfortable. But God is saying, it's time for this mission to move forward. And I love you so much, God is saying to American Jews. I love you so much. I desperately want you to be a part of it.
So is the agenda of your book for Jews to make Aliyah, is that really what is driving the message of the book, that you're trying to convince American Jews to make Aliyah, to move to Israel?
So obviously that's the end goal. There's no question. If I would say no, of course I'd be lying. We want the Jews to come home, right? There's no question. But the immediate agenda of the book is not that, because the reality is that the vast majority of Jews in America are not capable right now of making Aliyah. I don't mean financially. I mean, in terms of their connection to being Jews, they don't even know who they are. You can't expect or demand that people move to Israel without them first going through the middle stages, right? Finding their identity, discovering who they are, what they're all about. And frankly, that's really the main goal of my book here, which is to awaken American Jews to become the nation that they are meant to be, to identify with the Jewish nation, which is a hard thing to do. You're living in America. You didn't have a good Jewish education, perhaps. No one ever spoke to you that way before. And now all of a sudden anti-Semites are telling you that you're not a loyal American, right? And so they're thrown off, they're confused, they're struggling. It's very difficult. It's a hard time. And I feel for my brothers and sisters in America. And so the book here is not meant to be an attack, God forbid, quite the opposite. It's meant to reach out to Jews in America to say, you have a home, right? You have a nation, and you know what? It's the most unbelievable and awesome nation on earth, with no insult to America. It's God's chosen nation, right? God set you apart for an awesome mission. Be a part of it. Identify, connect. And not just on a religious level, right? Not just by, connecting like, I'm going to go to the synagogue, but recognize that you are part of an awesome and holy nation.
So I love that. That's hard to do, because Judaism in America, all of the organizations are really meant to strengthen Judaism, right? Yeah. Or outreach to make people more religious or more observant, to light Shabbat candles or to observe Shabbat or to keep kosher. There's so much focus on strengthening the religion of the Jewish people. And what you're saying is that we need to, and what your book is doing, is trying to bring out the other aspect of their identity, the nationhood.
Which I believe is actually the primary part of our identity, is Jewish nationhood.
And that's obvious because you live here in Israel and because we see soldiers everywhere. But how do you, or do in your book, how do you kind of dust that off for people and train them in that muscle that they haven't used in 2,000 years?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I'll start first by saying that, we use the term Judaism. Judaism is actually not a Jewish word, as funny as that sounds. Judaism comes from the Greek word iudaismos. The Greeks made up the word Judaism. So even though we now say Judaism in English or Yahadut in Hebrew, the source of this is Greek. You will not find the word Judaism in the Bible. In fact, you will also not find the word religion in the Bible. It doesn't exist. Right? We have words for that now in modern Hebrew, right? But we don't have these words in the Bible because they're foreign categories for God. The Jews were never a Judaism. We were never an ism of any sort. We were a nation, and we still are a nation, even though that element, the aspect of our nationhood, or the key part of our identity, became downtrodden and to a great degree forgotten over the course of our long exile. But what we're seeing in America today is something really fascinating, right? Where this is happening, where there are plenty of Jews who are reconnecting to their Jewish identity, to their nationhood, even without necessarily doing all of the religious pieces to it.
Right.
I'll give you a couple of examples. there's Michael Rappaport, the actor, foul-mouthed actor.
The great, radio personality.
That's right. He was on, I think he had a 4-episode run on Friends back in the day, right? He was Phoebe's boyfriend,
Okay.
I believe so.
I did not know that.
You can look that one up.
Phoebe's boyfriend.
So Michael Rappaport, was totally disconnected from anything Jewish. But on October 8th, when he saw people in New York, protesting in support of Hamas as Jews were being slaughtered all over Israel, he was shaken awake and he realized, wait a second, I'm part of the Jewish people. And so, yes, he has embraced, there's one particular religious commandment that he's embraced, which is tefillin, which is phylacteries, right? Mm-hmm. And he'll put them on and take pictures of himself, selfies all the time. But he's not a religious person. I mean, he doesn't keep the Sabbath. He's not keeping kosher. He's not necessarily, so for him, I think the putting on the tefillin, the phylacteries, is really more of a national statement. It's his way of showing the world, I am part of the Jewish people. And he is standing up proud and fighting anti-Semites and standing for Jewish identity. And he's really one of these unlikely heroes of American Jews today. Another person would be Sheryl Sandberg, if you remember her, the COO of Facebook. So Sheryl Sandberg, her kids were, she talks about this very openly, wanted nothing to do with Jewish people, religion, anything, completely disconnected. But since October 7th, she has become completely transformed, her whole family, right? She talks about how now her primary identity is that I am a Jew. And her kids, they're not religious Jews per se, right. But one of them is now the head of the Jewish club at her college. Another one is now wearing like a Jewish Star of David necklace. Right. A Jewish Star of David necklace. Some people might say, what does that mean? Right? It's just a little jewelry. I say they're absolutely wrong. Somebody walking around with a Jewish Star of David necklace, identifying as part of the nation of Israel, is a very big deal. Right. And in fact, I'll go so far as to say that is the criteria to be included in the final redemption. Right. And this will take me, let me give me a moment to explain this. Right. Redemption is happening here in Israel. It's going forward, whether people like it or not, it's happening. Yeah. Right. We are moving forward. Israel is becoming a regional superpower. The Israelis are returning to God. It's moving forward. Right. The only question, and this is the question of free will, is will you be a part of it? And American Jews have to decide, will they connect to this? Will they be part of this redemptive process? Now, who's going to be part of it, right? How is this self-selection going to happen? So we actually have precedent for this from the first redemption, the original Exodus, when the people of Israel left Egypt. So the Jews have a tradition, which is, maybe if you haven't heard this before, you'll find it shocking, that only 1 out of 5 Israelites actually left Egypt, because it says that we left chamushim in Hebrew, which literally means armed, but it also means chamushim, like a fifth. Only 1/5 of the people of Israel left Egypt. So where were the other 4/5? What happened? The simple understanding is that they just stayed in Egypt and they became Egyptians and they were lost to the people of Israel forever. So who are the ones that left and who are the ones that stayed? Because even the ones that left, we know, were not particularly religious, right? We actually have traditions. The Zohar, the Jewish, the Kabbalists say that when we were walking through the Red Sea, right, the people of Israel were carrying their idols as they walked through the Red Sea. Right. Which is kind of unbelievable if you think about it. God is splitting the sea and they're holding their idols. Yeah. So clearly they were not such, faithful, religious, perfect people when they left Egypt. So why were they the ones to leave? So the sages say that it was the Jews or the Israelites who kept their Hebrew language, who kept their Hebrew names, their Hebrew clothing, who married their fellow Hebrews. They were the ones who left Egypt. Mm-hmm. Those are not religious requirements. Those are national elements of identity. When you speak Hebrew, when you wear your Jewish star necklace, you wear your Hebrew clothing, right? When you marry your fellow Hebrew, those are national acts. And it was the people of Israel who stayed connected to their nationhood, even if they weren't so religious. Right. They were the ones who were included in redemption, which is why I believe that people like Michael Rappaport or Sheryl Sandberg, who may not be particularly religious, they are part of our redemption, right? They and all the people that they represent, the Jews who are choosing to identify with the people in the nation of Israel. It's not an easy thing to do today. All the pressure in America is to reject Israel. That's where all of it's going, and all of the anti-Semites are pushing people away. Any Jew in America who says, I don't care, these are my people, that is an awesome act. And even without moving to Israel, before you move to Israel, simply identifying with your nation and publicly throwing in your lot with the people of Israel is an awesome moment.
Wow. Yeah. And what you said kind of triggered for me the distinction that you made between Judaism as a religion, or you say there is no such thing as Judaism, but the religious and the nation.
Clearly there's a religious element. God wants us not just to be a regular nation. We're a holy nation, but we're not a faith.
Right. So during the long exile, we really dove deep into the details of the religion, and how many strings are on the tzitzit, and how to tie the tzitzit, and what color are the tzitzit, and when to wear the tzitzit. We dug deep into the details of the religious faith, and all of the aspects of nationalism we not ignored because they just weren't relevant, and therefore they were too depressing, maybe even to think about. And so we kind of ignored those. And as a result, they atrophied. And now that we're back in Israel, though, like what Rousseau said in the beginning, now that we're here, we're able to have these conversations and think about the implications. American Jews are still very much like living in an exile mind frame, right? Or, that's what the Jews who left Egypt also had, this exile mentality. And it took a generation for them to rid themselves. In order to receive the Torah, go into Israel, there had to be a new mind frame, a new mentality. And so you give in the book some practical examples of how to start, I guess, for American Jews to get over that exile mentality in order to prepare themselves for embracing their Jewish identity. Or
so
their
what
Jewish
you're talking
nation.
about is so critical, and it really can come down to, we can make it very simple, the difference between, on the one hand, the Jewish Talmud, right, the oral Torah, and on the other hand, the Hebrew Bible, right? These are two elements of our tradition, right? They are foundational pillars for Jews. I know the Christians, they don't accept the oral Torah. That's fine. But it is important for everyone to realize they're both essential to who we are, but they have very different roles, right? The Talmud is all about the details, as you were talking about before. How do I actually live out, right, what God wants me to do on a day-to-day level, right? All these details. What do I do? But that's not what the Hebrew Bible is there for. The Hebrew Bible, which was frankly not completely ignored, but was not studied as much as it should have been over the long years of the exile. The Hebrew Bible is not about what to do. It doesn't give you enough detail to really know how to put it all into practice. The Hebrew Bible is there for a very different reason. It tells us what to do as a nation, right? Big picture, not the day-to-day detail. It tells us what our identity is, who we are meant to be. It tells us what we as a nation are meant to accomplish, big picture, our vision, the vision of the people of Israel. And frankly, it's also a prophetic guidebook for what we are going to experience through the rest of time, right? So because Jews living in exile, they were not part of an independent Jewish nation. They were scattered all over the place. So if you're some Jew living in some small village in Ukraine in the year 1800, the stories of the Book of Samuel don't seem all that relevant. What is this about? Kings and armies and prophets, right? We're just a bunch of poor Jews. I'm a tailor, or I'm a woodcutter living in a little village in Ukraine. It's complete. It just feels so far, so distant, so irrelevant. Whereas today, when we're back in the land of Israel, all of a sudden, it doesn't mean that the Talmud is not relevant anymore. You still need to know what to do on a day-to-day. But all of a sudden, these stories of the Bible, everything comes to life. And we realize that they're not just stories. They are a prophetic guidebook for how we are supposed to navigate our new national life, our new old national life. We're back to being a nation. And all of a sudden, kings and armies and enemies, all of these things are incredibly relevant. And we desperately need the Bible to guide us. And so part of awakening American Jews to who we are and where we are meant to be is is that we have to guide them back to the Bible. As funny as that might sound to our non-Jewish friends, for whom the Bible is everything, right? But for Jews, the Talmud is such an enormous part of who we are. And again, I'm not rejecting the Talmud, God forbid, but we have to make space, right? And there's a reason why in America, the Bible is still not studied the way that it should be. Whereas here in Israel, where we are living this nationhood, there's an unbelievable renaissance of biblical study that is happening today. In fact, the number one gathering of Bible scholars is happening next week, every year. This is the biggest one of the year that's happening next week, right in my area in the Judean hills. There's going to be, many hundreds of people for 4 or 5 days. It's going to be, the greatest scholars of Israel coming together to study the Bible in a way that it hasn't been studied for thousands of years. It's incredible. Whereas in America, they're just still studying the Talmud the way that they did 100 years ago and 200 years ago and 300 years ago.
For sure.
So that is a huge difference. And we've got to shift, right? We have to shift people's thinking back to the Bible, as funny as that sounds.
Yeah, no, I know personally, upon making Aliyah, so, I just started immersing myself in the Tanakh. And then, the Israel Bible was the outcome of that. And it brings, it like you said, the Talmud, maybe the Oral Torah explains what to do, but the Tanakh explains who we are. Yeah,
exactly right.
Now, there is a story in the Tanakh that is very similar to the dilemma that you're describing in the book, and I think that you talk a lot about in the book, and that's the story, the Book of Esther, right? So can you just quickly, because we're running out of time, there's been a great conversation. I just want to quickly touch upon the Book of Esther and how that's relevant to today.
So the Book of Esther, more than any other book, I believe, in the Bible, speaks to what American Jews are living through today, because it's essentially the exact same story. People don't realize, but the Book of Esther happened, 50 years. That whole story of Esther and Haman, it happened 50 years after the Second Temple was rebuilt.
Right.
And yet 95% of the Jews in the world stayed in Persia and said, no, thanks. We're not interested in going back to Israel and being there in Jerusalem with the Second Temple. So essentially, American Jews today who are saying, I don't want to go back to Israel, are in a very similar situation as, to the Jews of Persia in that time.
And that little detail has really been glossed over. A lot of, if you were to ask most people who are familiar with the Book of Esther, most Jewish people, they would think that it happened during that 70 years of exile.
Or like right after Cyrus.
Yeah. And that Mordecai and Esther, then, the curtain goes down and they lead the people back to Israel. But it's not true. It's
not true.
It was after the temple was already rebuilt.
So it's the same situation where you have Jews in exile who are happy in exile and do not want to return back to Israel, which is a hard job, right? Israel was destroyed. And it had to be rebuilt, and it was a difficult life.
Yeah.
It required a real pioneer spirit, and only a tiny percentage of the Jews, as it talks about in the beginning of the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, or talks there about how only a small percentage of the Jews, some thousands of Jews, went back when Cyrus said that you can go back and you can rebuild your temple. And so therefore, the Book of Esther, the whole frame for the Book of Esther is really the same as that of American Jews today. And what does God do? He sends a Haman. He sends a Haman to awaken the people of Israel, right? And to tell them, you guys are not Persians. Ultimately, you are Jews. And you got to go back, right? Know who you are. Reconnect to your identity. And we're experiencing today. Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, all these people are the Hamans of our time. And so these books of the Bible are not just history, right? They are, again, a prophetic guidebook, a blueprint for what the people of Israel will experience for the rest of time. And by studying the Book of Esther in its proper frame and understanding when this happened and what really is happening here, that, when Mordecai says to Esther, you've got to choose, right? In that famous chapter 4 of the Book of Esther, right? When he says you have to choose, what is he really saying to Esther? He's not just saying that you have to choose to have courage and risk your life to save the Jewish people. He's saying you have to choose. Are you a Persian or are you a Jew? Right? Because one way or another, salvation will come to the Jews. The real question is, will you be a part of it? And that's what American Jews are going through today, right? Salvation will come to Israel. I'm not worried. I mean, it's been painful. So in that sense, I'm worried. But I know big picture, we will prevail. God has made promises to us. They will not go unfulfilled. I have no doubt. The real question is to American Jews is, will you be a part of it? And again, this is such a sign of God's love, because even though it's now 78 years after the state of Israel was established, God refuses to give up on American Jews. And he's saying to them, guys, we need you. We love you. Awaken to your identity and to your mission on this earth. I think it's the greatest, I know it sounds crazy, but this anti-Semitism we are experiencing in America today, I believe is an unbelievable love letter, and a kiss from God to his people.
Because unlike in the 1930s, and people love comparing ourselves to the 1930s, but unlike the 1930s, so where there was nowhere to go, so now Jews have in a few hours they could be back here, but not every American Jew is able to make Aliyah. We both have family in America and loved ones who love Israel very much, and it's not like I wouldn't doubt that for a second, right? But because of the situation and the elderly parents and grandparents and the jobs, there are legitimate reasons that they cannot come or they cannot come now. So what are they supposed to do? What is the lesson that they're supposed to get?
So I'll be very clear that I am in no way sitting in judgment on any individual person, right? Everybody, you're right. If you have elderly parents and so on, people will come when they come. I hope they'll make it here, but I'm not sitting in judgment. Everybody has their own individual situation. My problem, my great criticism is actually towards American Jewish leadership for not being honest about who we are and where we belong. Right? That really is my criticism, not of any individual person and their ability to come to Israel or not. We have to. It's not an easy thing to do, but a rabbi has to get up and tell his congregation that we don't have a long-term future here. Not because America is bad. America is amazing, right? But this is not where God intended for us to be. And right. I'm not saying that I'm going today, you're going today. We all have our individual situations, but let's have honesty here. Otherwise, you end up falling into the sin of the spies and turning your hearts away from the land. And we saw where that brought the people of Israel, not to a very good place.
Right. Or keeping Judaism in a off message and, turning
it into a religion detached from a nation, because that's not, that's what it becomes, right? If you detach nationhood and you just make it about ritual, you've turned the Jewish people into Judaism. And that, of course, as I've been saying, is a lie. But I before we finish, I just want to throw in, 2 cents here about what does this mean for our non-Jewish friends,
right? I was going to get to that, because it does seem that at Israel 365, we are mainly talking to a non-Jewish audience, also a Jewish audience, but is your book relevant for non-Jews as well?
So I'll tell you why I believe it is incredibly relevant. God is very clear throughout the Bible that the redemption of the world is bound up with the redemption of Israel. They are inseparable. Now, he's also very clear that the purpose of the Jewish people is, as we said before in Exodus, right, is to be a nation of priests. Priests are meant to teach, meaning the goal is not the priest. The goal is the people that the priest is teaching, meaning the goal that God has in setting Israel aside are the nations, right? They matter enormously. They're the point. That's the whole goal, not just Israel. Israel is the means to get to the ends, right, to bring the whole world to God. Now, that can only happen if the people of Israel fulfill their role. If we, the Jews, do not do what we are meant to do, we are cheating the nations of the earth, right? So American Jews who refuse to accept that we're a nation, who choose not to be a part of it, they're holding up the redemption of the world, and they are holding back, right, the gifts and the blessings that we are meant to bestow upon the nations. Right. If Jews are not Jews the way that they are meant to be, then the nations cannot be the nations the way they are meant to be. Jews and Christians are not the same, and that's how God intended it. We are a nation. Christians are a worldwide awesome faith. And we have to understand that we're different and play different roles.
Right. I heard some explain that is the real true reason for anti-Semitism is that the Tucker Carlsons of the world, they, like you said many times, but they understand something about the Jewish people, and they hate us when we are not living up to our role. They resent us. We're holding them back in a very deep, subconscious way. They know, they understand that we're holding them back.
Exactly right. They're waiting for us to bring our unique message to the world, right? The world is looking for the why, for the how, the world desperately needs leadership. We know that this world is getting more and more lost. It's why Europe is self-immolating, right? It's the source of so many of the problems on this earth. And if the Jews do not step up to play our role, then we are cheating the nations of the earth. And by lying about it, by telling ourselves and telling them that we're a religion and that we're not a nation and that we're Americans in just the same way that you are, we are failing in our mission to be God's chosen people. And that's why, of course, this is so incredibly relevant for our non-Jewish friends, for our Christian friends. Look, Christians have a very different role. Christians are this unbelievable faith that has brought the Bible to every last corner of this earth, to every island on this earth. And that's a different role. It's an essential role, but it's a different role from what the people of Israel are meant to do, which is that we have to create a nation in one particular place that teaches the world how to live as a holy nation, which is not an easy thing to do. No one has ever figured that out. Nobody. We have a lot of holy individuals in the world, but nobody has ever figured out how to have a really, truly holy country. We had it for a few years with King Solomon, David and Solomon, and then it all fell apart.
That was a while ago.
It was a long time ago.
Right. So basically, Jews should read the book so that they understand their identity. Christians should read the book and then give it to a Jewish friend.
Exactly right. And understand, that recognizing that Jews are different and that Jews don't truly ultimately belong to America in the way that you do, it doesn't make you an anti-Semite. It just makes you a person who believes in the Bible.
So where could Jews and Christians get Countdown?
All right. The best possible place is Israel365store.com. And you'll check it out there. It's easy to find. Countdown, American Jews and God's Plan for Redemption. And really, Rabbi Tuly, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was a great conversation. And thank you for writing this book, because it really is what is necessary. God is showing so much love for his people, doing miracles in Israel on a daily basis. But it is also that love extends to Jews and non-Jews all over the world. We just have to be listening.
Amen. Thank you.